right, I think we're now live. I want to welcome everybody. It's Bernard Nomberg with the Nomberg Law Firm in Birmingham, and we've been trying to do this for a couple of weeks now, and we're going to keep doing it a couple of days a week. I'm bringing on everybody. Oops, that's a little loud. I'm bringing on different people in their areas of expertise in their industries, and just trying to explain how the impact of the pandemic is in their world, and just trying to provide some answers to people in the community who may be looking for them. All of these interviews are housed on our YouTube channel as well as our Facebook page. And I want to welcome my friend Charlotte Christian from Huntsville. How are you doing, Charlotte?
Hey, thank you, Bernard. Appreciate your allowing me to be here with you.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. And Charlotte is going to talk to us today. We're going to get into dealing with divorce, domestic relations, and related type issues, and how the impact has, how to deal with it. So we want to welcome everybody who joins us. And we're going to talk for 15 to 20, 30 minutes, just depending on how long people need to hear from us. But Charlotte, before we jump into any specifics, if you would just share a little bit about yourself and your practice up in Huntsville.
Absolutely. So we practice all domestic law. That's all we do is divorce work and custody work. We actually take some cases in Birmingham as well. So been going down there quite a bit, but we do a lot of stuff virtually. So we were already
But before we jump
practicing.
into any, go ahead. Sorry about that.
That was fine. Before we, before the pandemic hit, we were already doing a lot of stuff virtually, just because I
Mhm.
was in so many places, and I recognized that if I could do more virtually, I could see more people and provide help to more people. So we had kind of already were putting the plan together and had solidified it to a large extent. Of course, it's all it's getting the nuts and bolts tight is especially with the pandemic hitting is takes a little while, but it's been working really well.
Well, it sounds like that your practice was a little bit ahead of the game, and it seems like it's probably been a fairly, I would say, seamless transition. I doubt any firm has seamlessly gone to it, but you're probably as easy a jump or a change as anyone. Um, Charlotte, what have you seen? Uh, what are some of the issues that you've seen that really have popped up in the last several weeks that either your clients or people looking to hire you, what's on their mind about how to deal with the pandemic?
Yeah, I think probably what's on most people's mind when they're getting a divorce or there's a custody issue, the word that I use most often, and I think is on people's mind, is the word fear. I think people fear not only what we don't know, but now we have a pandemic to fear. So I think custody and dealing with your children and what happens with the transition from mom's house to dad's house, that's a big concern of so many people. So we've had pretty much two areas, one of which is that a lot of divorces are coming out of this already.
Mm-hmm.
China, the numbers that came out of China were great after they opened back up. The divorce numbers were just pretty much out of the roof. So we kind of knew that it was coming. We knew that the numbers were going to spike up. So we really, while we were down those few weeks, just completely closed in. We really tightened up our processes and procedures so that we could help more people and get people in and out quickly. But what we're seeing is the numbers skyrocketing with people wanting to get a divorce, and then the number one issue is the actual custody and the concerns surrounding that.
Well, Charlotte, are you finding that the courts that you're dealing with, are they figuring out how to properly respond in a timely manner to these issues? They're all very emotional issues, as divorce and domestic relations and custody issues can be. But are the courts in Alabama able to respond um, timely so that you can help get answers for your clients?
We have practicing primarily in Huntsville and Madison County. It's a technology driven place already. Uh, Judge Ruth Ann Hall is our presiding judge, and they have done an amazing job in the courts here, keeping people going. I mean, I've been able to get everything to go through and deal with any filing issues, deal with everything except an actual trial. A person has the right to face his or her accuser, so it's going to be more difficult to ever get a trial. I think to the video world, but I think that there's going to be a possibility. You and I were talking beforehand that we spend so much time during a day. We may spend 6 hours of our day going from county to county just to a docket call where we just go up and tell a judge, yes, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, we're ready or we're not ready, and we need this from you, and it could be something that could be handled very quickly. But I think what's going to happen, Bernard, is I think the courts are going to see how efficient it is to actually just pretty much have everybody in a row on a Zoom call and go from person to person. Here it did, then their courtrooms are not clogged up. You're not looking for parking. You're not looking for all the things that clog up a courtroom, clog up a
Yeah.
courthouse and personnel. I mean, I think it can be so much more efficient. But to answer your question, yes, our judges are working very hard to get us where we need to be.
It's from an efficiency standpoint, I think you're right. It's so many hours are spent traveling and then sitting and waiting and those kind of things that hopefully some of this technology will stick around. It'll make things uh, more efficient for our clients. But in the world of domestic relations and custody and those types of things that your practice surrounds, Charlotte, just because we're in the middle of this upside down world with the pandemic, the court orders, they're still to be enforced. And how are you
Absolutely.
finding when you have child custody issues, when a child is supposed to be with one parent for a certain weekend or prescribed period of time? How are you dealing with those issues when we have stay in place and quarantines in different cities, and our governor on April 5th put in a statewide order dealing with those things? How are you dealing with that with your clients?
I think Governor Ivey's order speaks specifically to the fact that the stay in place does not affect custody, so the custody transfers have to still happen. What I tell people when there's so much fear, especially initially, it's hard to, it's very difficult in a divorce to say, okay, I've had my child with me his or her whole entire life, and now then I'm going to have to let him go stay with dad for a week or go stay with mom for a week. That's very hard already. But when you enter in a pandemic into that mixture, it just the fright level is just great. But what I always tell people at the beginning is when they're so frightened is that you have to assume, and you're not always going to be correct, but you have to assume that that other parent loves your child and has that child's best interest in their heart as much as you do. Now, that may not mean that they do exactly like you do, they
Mhm.
parent exactly like you do, or they put the kid to bed at the same time as you do. But those are the negatives to getting a divorce, is that you can't control what the other parent does with the child. But I've been saying the same thing, Bernard, during this, is that you have to assume that if the other parent is putting the child or the children, in some dangerous position, that they're being careful with it. I've seen, and I'm sure you have, a lot of these doctors and nurses who are going and waving at their kids through windows. Their kids may be with the other parent, maybe with grandmom or something like that, and
Mhm.
they know how dangerous this is and they know how scary this is, so they themselves are putting their children in a safer situation. And I would certainly hope that all parents would do that. But if we're dealing with a parent who's not doing it, then you may have to ask the court to intervene. If you've got a doctor or a nurse who's just bringing it in the house and not taking proper care for the children, then we would have to ask the courts for help during this time.
Well, certainly. And Charlotte, we're now 5, 6 weeks into this, the pandemic and the court orders and different things that are supposed to be happening. But are you seeing our parents, are your clients, are they still um, unsettled? Are they still very nervous about things, or are things starting to settle down a little bit? That the routine of it all is starting to fall into place a little bit for the children as well as their parents.
I think initially it goes back to that fear word. Everybody was so scared, but now then things are loosening up a little bit. I think that it's settling down. I'm not getting as many calls and as much seeing as much frightened phone calls as I was initially. So I think that it has settled down, and because of that, I think it will continue to. Now, if we see the numbers go back up,
Mhm.
then the concern may come back from these parents. But I think, as a general rule, things have calmed down enough that the parents' fears are allayed a little bit, and the concerns a little bit less.
Are your trials, I know that the courts in Alabama, for at least jury trials, have been pushed off. For bench trials, they can go forward so long as there's the technology and the courts is comfortable with doing so. We have not had a workers' compensation trial just yet, but I've had a few hearings. Have gone very smoothly. The courts have been very uh, hospitable and easy to work with. Have you had an occasion yet to have hearings or to have any trials yet in your domestic cases?
We have mediated some cases
Mm-hmm.
via Zoom, but we have not had a hearing or any trials. I'm not exactly sure. I'm glad to hear you say that because I was wondering how a trial would actually happen. So I'm glad to hear you say that it can happen.
I
But we
think the
have not.
more the more experienced and comfortable the judge and maybe the judge's assistants are with the technology, I think that allows all the parties involved a little bit more of ease to be able to handle those types of things.
Oh yeah,
Um,
another lever, Bernard, that we've been looking at using is actually private judging because
mhm,
there's private judges in the state who can uh, have a trial outside of the courtroom and outside the court system, and we use that sometimes with cases that people really want to hurry up and get a
mhm.
divorce, but they need somebody to help divide their assets or their custody. We kind of utilize that and pull that lever to speed up. So that is an option during this while the pandemic is going on, is that you can use these private judges, and it's an actual trial. And as you know, um, the decisions from the private judge hold
Mhm.
up just the same as a judge on the bench. They have to follow the rules of civil procedure and uh, do everything that a private judge would do.
Sure.
Their ruling is appealable. So
Mhm.
it's just as if you have a judge, you just have to pay for this judge. This is not a judge
Right.
provided by the state. So it is a bit more expensive, but it's certainly another lever that you can pull, another option that we've utilized.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we're talking with Huntsville attorney Charlotte Christian, where the issues that we're talking about today is the impact of domestic relations, divorce, and child custody cases during our pandemic that's going on. And Charlotte is sharing with us that life goes on. Domestic relation cases, the orders still have to be followed. The families, or what were the families, the parties really have got to abide by state law when it comes to not just their cases, but what's going on around the state, and the governor's stay in place order from the 5th of this month. And one of the fears that I personally have, Charlotte, is that when some of the phases that are going to be brought in that I've been hearing about from an economic standpoint around the state, they're going to start opening up society a little bit. And people, as they will do, will take advantage of those things. So, my question to you is, how do you, with your clients, going to be able to continue to, I guess, get along, if you will, with the parties on the other side when maybe one parent is a little hesitant about getting back into society with the child versus the other parent who isn't as cautious? I don't know if you've reached one of those situations just yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
I have no doubt it's coming, Bernard. I'm sure that it will. You know, the law doesn't really give us a lot of leeway with regard to what we can do, because if you changed custody, there would have to be a material change of circumstances, and I don't think that would. It's just according to what the action was for
I don't
there
know if
to,
you've reached
for
one
there
of
to
those.
be there to be some movement on our part that we could do something with the courts, but certainly we would have to look at every situation individually and see what we could do. But I would again, say it would. You just have to hope that the other parent did the best for the child, and it may not be exactly like you do, but if they're putting the child in harm's way, certainly you have to take some legal action. I,
Well,
like you, fear that we may be. I don't know that we're opening up too soon because I'm certainly not a medical person, but I sort of feel like that we started feeling better from the penicillin, and we may be opening up. So I think we may see, we may stop taking the penicillin and see problems on the horizon. I don't know.
I had read last week, and I don't know if this is still to be true, that today, the 20th, was supposed to be our peak day in the pandemic. I haven't seen anything today, but I really haven't read much of the news that after today, hopefully, we're supposed to be on the decline of this. But even with that, and I'm certainly not medically trained as well, there's certainly hopefully lots of other more wise and educated people dealing with this. But from your standpoint, Charlotte, I bet you're now going to be entering into having to deal with issues that a couple of months ago you would have never dreamed that this would be part of our decision making and advising clients. So I'm sure you're going to be treading into new territories a little bit with things.
And a lot of the advice that we give is just it is not book advice or it's not case law. It's just what we know from
Yeah,
experience because we deal with these judges, so you know I'm gonna know or feel like I can give somebody good advice as to what would happen. Of course, you can't read the judge's mind, but
right.
it's just going to be a case by case basis of look, this is new, let's try it this way or let's tweak it that way, um, to try to ease some fears. But certainly I know that they're coming, and I would have fears if I thought that I had to let my children go somewhere that where it wasn't as insulated as what I feel like my home is. Then I would be equally concerned. So I'm sure that there's going to be valid concerns.
Well, I want to welcome, we've got a bunch of folks who are in joining us. And if you guys have questions for Charlotte, please throw it into the comment section here. And we'll make sure we get that question to her. Charlotte, I'm going to put the link to your website in the comments section. But if folks want to reach out to you with questions about domestic relations, divorce, child custody issues, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure. So they can email me directly, and I'll tell you what my website is. It's charlottechristianlaw.com.
Got that? Okay.
And you can go there and get our number, but my email is cchristian@charlottechristianlaw.com. Anybody can email me, and I'll get back with you, and I'm happy to do so.
Okay. Repeat that one more time, Charlotte, the email.
Christian,
Mm-hmm.
so at charlottechristianlaw.com.
Okay. Charlotte, what type of advice are you giving in general? Obviously, I'm not asking about a particular case, but what are you telling your clients now to be able to ease their fears, to calm them down a little bit about how they're supposed to be dealing with whatever the issues may be domestically in during this time while we're still in our stay in place or quarantine time period?
You know, I think as far as advice is just take a deep breath. Take a
Mhm.
deep breath, step back, and determine. You know, we all like to control our situation. Like I was saying, I want my house to be insulated because I'm insulating and protecting it. So I want anybody that goes outside of my house um, to be well and insulated. So if I had children going somewhere else, then I would have to step back and take a deep breath and just say, is my child going to be unsafe there? If my child's going to be unsafe there, genuinely, then then call your lawyer and have a conversation. Say, is this valid? Do I have a valid concern that needs to be dealt with? But just take a deep breath, man. That's what we've all had to do for a month because we all know that we're facing something that's unprecedented. That that we have to work through, and we'll have to work through it all, but we'll get through it. And I'm not hearing of people whose children are dying, because they've gone to dads or moms and have gotten it. Now it may be the case. I don't know. It may be the case, but just step back and call. I'm happy. Look, I know we're all scared, I'll spend time on the phone with you. I'm not gonna, I'll spend time on the phone with you. If you're not my client, and I can't talk to you if you have another lawyer. But if you don't have a lawyer and you want to talk to me, I'm happy to talk to you and see if I can't help you through some of your fears and tell you from my experience, what I'm seeing on the other side, because I'm
Mhm.
spending every day on the phone with people and I'm hearing the stories. So I may can help you and I'm happy to do that.
Charlotte, that's just so very important role for any lawyer is to give time to your clients, of course, but most of the time that stress level is through the roof when the clients don't have the answers to things that are most troublesome to them. And we've always concentrated on to lowering that stress level by providing the answers because we've all heard that the greatest fear is the unknown. It's what we
Absolutely.
don't know. And just being available for clients sounds to me like such a great service that we can all provide as lawyers. But I want to give you a real world scenario and tell me what you think about this. We've got a couple that are divorced, and there's a small child or a couple of children who are, say, 6 and 8 years of age, and they share custody. One uh, parent is a school teacher. Let's say the father's a school teacher, but the mother is an ICU unit nurse at one of the local hospitals. And she necessarily is going to be on the front line and being exposed to potentially the coronavirus or whatever else is out there. The father, the school teacher, he's now home and teaching, online. So he's not out in the public. But now the father has a real issue sending the kids back and forth because of the mother's work. And I'm just creating this scenario, but I see this as a real world situation that you might have to deal with. So how do you, let's play both parts here.
Sure.
How do you advise, let's say the mother is your client in this scenario, and the father is very hesitant, threatening not to let the kids go back to her house during that shared custody arrangement. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think what I would do if I were representing that mother is I think that I would try to come up with some level so that she could be comfortable enough to maybe allow the kids to stay with dad, but come up with some kind of way that she can visit the kids from a safe distance and not necessarily have them. Again, I'm not a medical professional,
Mhm.
so I don't know what those guidelines would be in her home or what would be the safest. But I would think as if I were a mother, I would want my children in a safer place. I wouldn't want to come out of an ICU unit
Mhm.
straight home to them. I have read, Bernard, about a case and I'm not sure the state, so I'm not even going to quote the state that I'm thinking, but where a doctor actually lost temporary custody of her children because the court said the children aren't safe being there. What
Yeah.
I would really caution people though to be careful because you don't want to get into a situation where you just allow your children to go somewhere without putting some measures in place to protect yourself because you wouldn't want a material change of circumstances just to say, well,
Mhm.
and give a father an ability to pile on, well, this was happening before, this was happening before, and this is the last straw.
Yeah.
So you would
Yeah.
have to look at the totality of the circumstances to see what the best advice would be. But you would need to consider all that. I would never just say, okay, even if I had a really good relationship with the father's children, I wouldn't just say, okay, I'm going to leave them with you 6 months or I mean 6 weeks without having some measure of protection in place, and I would have to craft what that was.
Well, hopefully the parties would get along and find some level of comfort or compromise based on the children's well-being. But we all know that in reality, a lot of times it's the children who end up being hurt the most because of this. But before we conclude, Charlotte, let's flip the scenario. You're now representing the father. The father, again, is he does not want the children to be exposed to the nurse mother because of her job, and she's out there risking her own life for the greater good for others. And you've got a 6 and 8 year old who are, I'm sure, conflicted, confused, as children should be at that age. How do you from an attorney standpoint, how are you advising your father teacher in this case?
Well, I'm going to tell my client, tell the father to let's work with the mother to alleviate her fears, so that she doesn't think that you're trying to take the children, especially if the mother has custody. To make her know and understand that we're not trying to take the children long term. Let's do something. If we have to let the kids every night for 2 hours sit on the porch with
Mm-hmm.
their iPads and let mom sit out on the, out on the patio or wherever to keep social
Right.
distancing so that the kids can see their mom. And let's make the mom comfortable knowing that we're not trying to take the kids. We're just trying to keep them safe right now. I think that's the approach I would take with dad. And then if mom were just not reasonable and just said no, we're gonna bring the kids home. I know what I'm doing. Then that's a legal discussion that we have to have at that point.
Might that send you to an emergency hearing with the judge?
Yeah, if mom reacts that way,
Mm-hmm.
if the other side is not being rational or reasonable, at that point, we absolutely would go to ask for an emergency hearing based on that.
Well, sadly, I'm sure that that very issue is being discussed every day around the country.
It is.
Charlotte, there's so many other scenarios and fact patterns that we could talk about, but I think that we've given a pretty good broad stroke of things. And I want to thank you for your time and your expertise today. This is such an emotional time for all of us, but when you're talking about domestic issues and children involved, it just heightens it even more so. Again, how can folks get in touch with you if they have these questions or concerns?
Sure, just call my office. It's 256-859-7277. My website is charlottechristianlaw.com. We have a YouTube channel and have, try to put a lot of information on that, and as well as Facebook. They can find me here. Just look up Charlotte Christian Law. You can send me a message here. But again, it's not, you know, I want to do right by the community and I want to do right by people. And I feel like right now is just a time of uncertainty. And I'm happy to talk to anybody. So if you have a lawyer, understand I can't talk to you. But if you don't have a lawyer and you just have a question, feel free to shoot it over to us via Facebook or email, and I'm happy to help.
Well, Charlotte, again, thank you very much for your time today. Guys, I hope that this has helped answer a few questions or at least head you in the right direction, finding your answers about dealing with divorce and domestic relations and custody issues during the pandemic. We're going to come out of this eventually. It's not going to be hopefully a permanent thing, and things will resume to some sense of whatever that new normalcy is going to be. But what's not going to change are these issues between families that are broken up for various reasons. And Charlotte's one of the very best up in North Alabama. So thank you, Charlotte, again for your time today.
Thank you for having me. You have a good day.
Absolutely. Guys, we'll see you on Thursday at 1 o'clock. We're going to have another discussion, another area impacted by the pandemic. And I hope that y'all have a good rest of your week. Take care.
Bye.